My name is Catrina, and at 68 years old, I never expected to design another wedding gown, especially not for my future daughter-in-law, Heather. After 40 years in the fashion industry, I thought I had retired my sketchbook until Jacob announced his engagement. Heather seemed perfect on paper, ambitious and beautiful, but when she dismissed my fashion advice, I knew we had a problem. Still, when Jacob asked me to secretly design her wedding dress, how could I refuse? What happened next changed everything. If you are just joining my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you want to hear how I surprised my daughter-in-law with her dream dress she never knew she wanted. Fashion was never just a career for me. It was a calling that began in the summer of 1975 when my mother taught me to sew on her old Singer machine. I was 18, full of dreams and ambition, sketching designs on any scrap of paper I could find. By 1980, I had graduated from Parsons School of Design in New York City and landed an apprenticeship with one of the top bridal designers in the country, Eleanor Winters. Under Eleanor's guidance, I learned the intricacies of creating wedding gowns that would become family heirlooms. She taught me how the right fabric could transform a simple design into something extraordinary. After 3 years of working endless hours surviving on coffee and determination, I finally got my big break when a bride requested one of my sketches instead of Eleanor's. Eleanor, instead of being threatened, encouraged me. "Catrina," she said, "you have a gift for capturing a woman's essence in your designs. Never lose that." Those words stayed with me throughout my career. By the late 80s, I had developed my signature style. My designs were known for blending traditional elegance with subtle modern touches. I incorporated delicate hand beading with clean lines, and my lace overlays became something of a trademark. Brides would come to me saying they wanted a dress that felt timeless, yet uniquely theirs. My philosophy was simple. A wedding gown should make a woman feel like the most authentic version of herself. 1990 marked a turning point when I opened my own boutique on Madison Avenue. Catrina Designs was small but exclusive. The space was intimate with soft lighting that made the gowns shimmer and a comfortable seating area where brides and their families could relax with champagne while we discussed their vision. My team consisted of just 4 seamstresses, initially all meticulously trained and as passionate about perfection as I was. Success came gradually but steadily. By the mid-90s, having a Catrina original became something of a status symbol. I never sought celebrity clients, but when actress Amanda Lawrence wore one of my designs at her highly publicized wedding in 1996, my phone didn't stop ringing for months. Soon after, several more Hollywood brides chose my gowns, and features in Vogue and Brides magazine followed. Amidst this whirlwind of professional success, I met Thomas at a charity gala in 1997. He was an architect with a quiet confidence and eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Unlike other men I had dated, who seemed intimidated by my success, Thomas was genuinely interested in my work. On our 3rd date, he asked to see my design studio, and I watched in amazement as he studied each sketch with the same attention to detail that he gave his buildings. We married in 1998. I designed my own dress, of course, though Thomas joked that it was the most stressful commission of my career. He was right. Creating a gown that embodied everything I believed about bridal fashion while also surprising the man I loved was no small challenge. In the end, I chose a minimalist silhouette with architectural elements that echoed Thomas's aesthetic. The simplicity of the silk column was offset by intricate beadwork along the back that told our story in a pattern only we could decipher. A year later, our son Jacob was born. Balancing motherhood with a thriving business tested me in ways design challenges never had. I learned to sketch with a baby sleeping on my chest, and to conduct client meetings during nap time. Thomas was an equal partner in parenting, often bringing Jacob to my studio where he would crawl among bolts of silk and tulle. As Jacob grew, he developed his own appreciation for art and design, though his talents eventually led him toward graphic design rather than fashion. Through the early 2000s, Catrina Designs expanded. We opened a 2nd location in Chicago, then a 3rd in Los Angeles. I traveled frequently fitting brides across the country while trying never to miss Jacob's baseball games or school performances. It wasn't always perfect, but we made it work. Jacob grew up understanding that passion and dedication were values worth pursuing, watching both his parents build careers they loved while maintaining our family bonds. 5 years ago, as I approached my mid-60s, I made the decision to semi-retire. I sold the boutiques but kept a small studio in our home where I could still take on special commissions. These days, I only design for clients who touch my heart in some way, brides who remind me why I fell in love with wedding fashion to begin with. Each gown is still made entirely by my hands, from the first sketch to the final stitch. Through all these years, I never lost my passion for design. There is something magical about creating the dress a woman will wear on one of the most significant days of her life. I have kept a photo of every bride I've dressed, over 500 of them now, in albums that line my studio shelves. Sometimes I look through them and marvel at how fashion has evolved while the emotion behind it remains constant. When Jacob called 2 years ago to tell us he had met someone special, I felt that familiar flutter of excitement. I had long dreamed of designing a gown for my future daughter-in-law, creating a piece that would welcome her into our family and perhaps someday be passed down to a granddaughter. I pictured us bonding over fabric swatches and veil lengths, sharing the kind of connection that only comes from creating something beautiful together. Little did I know that this dream would unfold in ways I never could have imagined. The first time Jacob brought Heather home, I prepared his favorite lasagna and set the dining room table with my best china. Thomas teased me for fussing so much, but I wanted everything to be perfect. We had met a few of Jacob's previous girlfriends, but something in his voice when he spoke about Heather told me this was different. They arrived just after 7, and my first impression was positive. Heather was strikingly beautiful with chestnut hair and confident posture. She brought an expensive bottle of wine and complimented our home with what seemed like genuine appreciation. Over dinner, she spoke intelligently about her career in marketing for a luxury cosmetics brand, and I was impressed by her ambition and drive. So much of her reminded me of myself at a younger age. The first hint of tension came when the conversation turned to family traditions. I mentioned the annual summer barbecue we host for our extended family, a tradition going back to Thomas's grandparents. "That sounds so retro," Heather said with a slight laugh. "Jacob and I usually do yoga retreats in the summer, much more centering than family drama." I noticed how she squeezed Jacob's hand as she spoke, and how quickly he nodded in agreement. It was small, but I felt a twinge of concern at how easily my son seemed to dismiss something that had been important to him throughout his childhood. By dessert, I had noticed Heather's tendency to check her phone whenever Thomas or I were speaking. She would smile politely, but scroll through notifications, only giving her full attention when Jacob spoke. Again, I told myself not to be oversensitive. Young people have different social norms around technology. 3 months later, they announced their engagement at another family dinner. Heather extended her left hand to showcase a diamond so large it seemed to pull her finger downward. "We had it custom made," she explained, "by this amazing designer in Manhattan who only works with ethically sourced diamonds. It cost a fortune, but some things are worth investing in, right?" The comment stung slightly as her eyes briefly flicked to my own modest engagement ring, a family heirloom that had belonged to Thomas's grandmother. "It is beautiful," I said genuinely. "And speaking of the wedding, I would love to help with any planning. After years in the bridal industry, I have quite a few connections that might be useful." Heather's smile remained fixed. "That is so sweet of you, Catrina. But I have very specific ideas for this wedding. I want something thoroughly modern and unique. I have already hired Valerie Peters as our planner. She does all the celebrity weddings in Malibu." Valerie is excellent. I acknowledged having worked with her on several gowns over the years. I actually designed a dress for her sister back in 2010. Really, Heather looked surprised for a moment before her expression shifted back to polite disinterest. "Well, everything is very different now. Wedding trends have completely transformed in the last few years." As planning progressed over the next few weeks, Heather established a pattern of asking for my opinion only to immediately override it. When I suggested a venue I knew had spectacular sunset lighting for photographs, she interrupted me mid-sentence. "We have already booked the Glass Pavilion," she said. "It is the most exclusive venue in the city with a 2-year waiting list. Jacob's father pulled some strings with the owner." Thomas had indeed called in a favor with the owner, who was a former client, but only after Heather had insisted it was the only acceptable location. The price was exorbitant, but she dismissed our concerns. "This is going to be the most important day of our lives," she told Jacob within my hearing. "We should not compromise based on outdated ideas about what things should cost." As the months passed, I tried to connect with Heather through other avenues. I invited her to lunch, suggested we take a cooking class together, even offered to show her some of my design archives when she mentioned an interest in vintage fashion. Each invitation was met with a polite excuse about her busy schedule. The most concerning moments were when I would overhear her speaking to Jacob when they thought I was out of earshot. Once, after I had shared a story about my early career struggles, I went to the kitchen for coffee and heard her say, "Your mom is sweet, but she does not understand how different things are now. Nobody wants to hear about the old days." Jacob's response was what hurt most. "I know, babe. Just humor her, okay? She means well." I found myself withdrawing, sharing less of myself at family gatherings. Thomas noticed and tried to reassure me. "She is just young and insecure," he said one night. "She will mature. Remember how your mother thought I was not good enough for you at first?" But this felt different. My mother's concerns about Thomas had come from a place of protection, not dismissal. She had never made him feel irrelevant or outdated. 4 months before the wedding, Jacob called asking if I would come to his apartment while Heather was at work. When I arrived, I found him stressed and pacing. "Mom, I need to ask you something," he said. "Heather is struggling with the wedding planning. Everything has to be perfect, and it is taking a toll on her. On us, honestly." I sat beside him on the couch. "What can I do to help?" He looked at me with such hope that I felt my heart constrict. "Would you be willing to come dress shopping with her? Her mother lives across the country and can only fly in for the final fitting. I know Heather can be particular, but she respects quality, and nobody knows wedding gowns like you do." Despite my reservations, how could I refuse? "Of course I will," I promised. Jacob hugged me tightly. "Just be patient with her perfectionism, okay? She puts a lot of pressure on herself. Her parents have really high expectations, and she has always felt she needs to prove herself." On the drive home, I thought about what Jacob had said. Perhaps I had been too quick to judge. If Heather was feeling pressure to create a perfect wedding, maybe her dismissive attitude was more about her own insecurities than any real problem with me. With this new perspective, I resolved to make a genuine effort to connect during our shopping trip, to show her I could be an ally rather than competition. I never imagined how painfully that hope would be shattered. The bridal appointment was scheduled for a Saturday in March at Eloise's, one of the most exclusive salons in the city. I had worked with Eloise herself back in the 90s, designing several pieces for her collection before she opened her own boutique. Though we had both semi-retired, we still exchanged Christmas cards and occasionally met for lunch to reminisce about the golden days of bridal fashion. I spent hours that morning deciding what to wear. I wanted to look professional but not overwhelming, stylish but not trying too hard. In the end, I chose one of my own designs from 1995, a tailored dress in seafoam blue with subtle architectural detailing that had been featured in Vogue that year. It was vintage now but still elegant. Or so I thought. I also brought my portfolio not to impose my designs on Heather, but to help identify silhouettes that might flatter her body type. After 40 years of dressing brides, I had developed an eye for which styles complemented different figures. It was knowledge I was eager to share if she was willing to receive it. Heather was already waiting when I arrived, tapping impatiently at her phone. She looked up briefly, offered a quick smile that didn't reach her eyes, and immediately returned to her screen. "Sorry I am a few minutes late," I said. "Parking was challenging." "It is fine," she replied without looking up. "I got here early to fill out their style profile. I already know exactly what I want." Just then, Eloise herself emerged from the back of the salon. Her face lit up when she saw me. "Catrina Wilson, what a wonderful surprise." She embraced me warmly. "Are you here as a professional consultant today?" Before I could answer, Heather stepped forward. "She is my future mother-in-law. I am Heather Davis. I have an appointment." Eloise looked between us momentarily confused, then recovered her professional demeanor. Of course, Miss Davis. And how fortunate you are to have Catrina with you today. She is one of the most brilliant designers I have ever worked with. Heather's smile tightened slightly. Really? That is interesting. A young attendant led us to a private viewing room with champagne and petite fours arranged on a silver tray. Heather immediately took control of the situation, handing the attendant her phone. I have saved exactly what I am looking for, she explained. Contemporary architectural minimal. Nothing traditional or fussy. As the attendant scrolled through Heather's inspiration photos, I noticed several gowns that seemed familiar. In fact, one was strikingly similar to a design from my 2010 collection. I kept this observation to myself, not wanting to seem like I was claiming ownership of the style. These are beautiful choices, I said carefully. I brought some reference materials that might help narrow down which silhouettes would be most flattering for your body type. I began to open my portfolio. Heather barely glanced at it. I already know what works for me. I am looking for something bold and innovative, not conventional. The slight emphasis on the last word felt pointed. I closed my portfolio and set it aside. The attendant returned with 5 gowns, each one a variation on the sleek, modern aesthetic Heather had requested. As Heather examined them, Eloise came to sit beside me. It is wonderful to see you, Catrina, she said quietly. Your influence is still felt throughout the industry, you know. Just last month I had a bride bring in a tear sheet of your '98 collection, asking if we could find something similar. I smiled, touched by the compliment. That is kind of you to say. I miss it sometimes, the excitement of a new collection. Our conversation was interrupted by Heather clearing her throat. I am going to try these on now, she announced. Catrina, perhaps you could wait here. Too many opinions can be confusing. Before I could respond, she and the attendant disappeared into the dressing room, leaving me alone with Eloise. She does not know, does she? Eloise asked softly. Know what? Who you are. Your significance in the industry. I shook my head. I have tried to connect with her, but she seems determined to keep me at a distance. Eloise patted my hand sympathetically. Young women today can be so focused on what is new that they miss the value of experience and tradition. 20 minutes later, Heather emerged in the 3rd gown, a column of ivory silk with a plunging back and minimal detailing. It was beautiful but lacked the warmth and personality that makes a truly special wedding dress. Still, her face was alight with satisfaction. This is the one, she declared. It is exactly what I imagined. You look lovely, I said sincerely. The silhouette suits you perfectly. Then, unable to help myself, I added, have you considered adding a bit of detail along the back? Perhaps some delicate beading to catch the light when you walk down the aisle. Heather's expression cooled. No, the minimalist design is the whole point. Adding beading would make it look outdated. Not necessarily, I began. There are ways to incorporate detail that enhance rather than detract from a modern silhouette. She cut me off with a sharp look. I know what I want. This is it. When the attendant mentioned the price, a figure that made even me blink, Heather did not flinch. Jacob's parents offered to contribute to the wedding, she said casually. This seems like a good use of that contribution. As Heather returned to the dressing room, I noticed Eloise studying my dress with appreciation. Is that the structured dream from your spring '95 collection? It was always one of my favorites. You have a good memory, I smiled. Yes, I thought it was still presentable for a special occasion. When Heather returned in her street clothes, she overheard this exchange and gave my outfit a dismissive once-over. That dress is vintage in a bad way, she said with a small laugh. No offense, Catrina, but it looks so dated. Those sleeves, that color. Very retirement community chic. The words struck like physical blows. I felt heat rise to my face but managed to maintain my composure. 40 years of professional poise came to my rescue. Fashion is cyclical, I said mildly. Every style has its moment. Heather shrugged. Some styles should stay in the past where they belong. As she turned away to complete the paperwork for her $12,000 gown, Eloise gave me a sympathetic glance. I stood there feeling utterly diminished, invisible, in a world I had once helped shape. The ride home was quiet, with Heather focused on her phone occasionally showing me reception venue photos that I responded to with appropriate enthusiasm. Inside, though, I was nursing a deep hurt. It wasn't just the insult to my dress or my taste. It was the casual dismissal of my entire professional identity, my lifetime of work reduced to retirement community chic. That evening, as I recounted the day to Thomas, I finally allowed tears to fall. "I do not understand what I have done to make her dislike me so much," I said. Thomas held me close. "It is not about you, Catrina. Some people build themselves up by putting others down. From what you have told me, Heather seems deeply insecure." Later that night, Jacob called. He sensed something had gone wrong and pressed me for details. I downplayed the incident, not wanting to come between him and his fiancée, but he knew me too well. "I am sorry, Mom," he said finally. "Heather has been under a lot of stress with work and the wedding. She sometimes says things without thinking." "It is fine," I assured him, though we both knew it wasn't. "No, it is not fine," Jacob insisted, and I heard genuine distress in his voice. "Look, there is something I want to ask you, something important." His next question would change everything. "Mom, would you design Heather's wedding dress?" Jacob asked, his voice both hesitant and hopeful. The request stunned me into momentary silence. After the day's humiliation, it was the last thing I expected. "Jacob, Heather already found a dress she loves," I reminded him. "An extremely expensive dress." "She thinks she loves it," he corrected. "But I saw your face when she was trying it on. It is not special enough for her, is it?" Despite everything, I had to be honest. The dress is beautiful, but it could be more. It does not capture her spirit. "Exactly." Jacob's voice grew animated. "Mom, I know Heather has been difficult, but beneath all that, she is actually insecure about fitting into our family. She comes from a background where appearances matter more than substance." "That does not excuse unkindness," I said softly. "No, it doesn't," he agreed, "and I have talked to her about it. But I also know that nobody creates wedding gowns like you do. You see the bride, not just the dress." My heart warmed at his faith in me, but practical concerns remained. "Jacob, even if I wanted to, Heather has made it clear she does not want my input." "That is why it would be a surprise," he explained. "A gift from me to her. She would never know you were designing it until after she falls in love with the dress." I sat down, my mind racing. How would that even work? She has already purchased a gown. "I told her I would handle the deposit while she thinks about it for a few more days," Jacob admitted. "The salon thinks she is comparing options at another boutique. They are holding the dress, but nothing is final." The idea was audacious and risky. Creating a wedding gown is an intensely personal process, typically involving multiple fittings and consultations with the bride. To design one in secret seemed nearly impossible. "I would need her measurements," I said already, thinking practically, despite my reservations. "Her mother could help with that. Patricia actually agrees with me that Heather would benefit from something more special than an off-the-rack gown, even a high-end one." The mention of Heather's mother surprised me. "You have discussed this with Patricia?" "We have gotten close since the engagement," Jacob explained. "She understands Heather better than anyone, including her tendency to reject the very things that would mean the most to her." I took a deep breath, considering. On one hand, Heather had hurt me deeply, dismissed my expertise, and shown little interest in building a relationship. On the other hand, this was my son asking, believing in my talent, offering me a chance to create something meaningful for a marriage that would connect our families forever. "I would need at least 2 months," I said finally. Jacob's relief was audible. "The wedding is in 3. Is that enough time?" "It will have to be," I said, my mind already sketching possibilities. The next day, I opened my studio for the first time in months. Dust motes danced in the sunlight, streaming through the windows, as I uncovered dress forms and organized fabric swatches. The familiar sense of silk and sizing brought back memories of countless brides, countless dreams I had helped bring to life. Patricia Davis called that afternoon. Unlike her daughter, she was warm and apologetic. "I am so grateful you are considering this, Catrina," she said. "Heather can be challenging, but she deserves a dress as special as your son. I have always admired your work, though I could never afford a Catrina original for my own wedding. This surprised me. You are familiar with my designs. Patricia laughed. Of course, I spent years in the fashion industry before moving to marketing. Your 90s collections were revolutionary. Heather does not know this, but her Pinterest board is filled with gowns inspired by your work, though I doubt she realizes it. This insight changed my perspective. I asked Patricia to send me Heather's inspiration images, and when they arrived, I began to see a pattern. Beneath Heather's insistence on modern minimalism was a yearning for the very elements I was known for: architectural structure balanced with subtle romance, clean lines, enhanced by thoughtful details. Patricia provided Heather's measurements secured from her recent fitting under the guise of considering alterations. I began sketching immediately, creating and discarding dozens of concepts before finding the right direction. The design that eventually emerged was unlike anything I had created before, yet unmistakably mine. A column of Italian silk formed the foundation, architectural and clean, as Heather wanted, but with a surprise element: a detachable overskirt of gossamer thin fabric that created movement and drama for the ceremony, then could be removed for a sleeker reception look. The back featured nearly invisible hand beading in a pattern that, viewed up close, incorporated tiny symbols representing both Heather and Jacob's interests and history. For weeks I worked from dawn until my fingers grew stiff, often losing track of time as I hand-sewed delicate beads or adjusted the drape of fabric. Thomas would bring me meals and gently encourage me to rest, but the creative fire had been rekindled. After years of semi-retirement, I was pouring everything I knew, everything I was into this one creation. Jacob visited often, providing updates and emotional support. Heather mentioned your dress again yesterday, he said during one visit. She actually apologized for what she said. Really? I looked up from my work, surprised. Well, sort of, he admitted. She said she should not have been so blunt about not liking vintage styles. But she is trying, Mom. I nodded, returning to the careful placement of crystals along the neckline. Whatever Heather's feelings about me, this dress was no longer about our relationship. It had become something more, a testament to what I believed about bridal fashion and family connections, a physical embodiment of hope for their marriage. The most challenging aspect was working without fittings. Measurements are just the beginning. Each bride's body responds differently to fabric and structure. I built in clever, adjustable elements and consulted with Patricia constantly, who managed to secure updated information about how the original dress had fit Heather's body. 2 weeks before the wedding, the gown was complete. I added my signature in its traditional place, a small tag sewn into the inner lining, visible only to those who knew to look for it. Then I carefully boxed the dress in acid-free tissue, tied with a blue ribbon, and called Jacob. When he saw the finished creation, his eyes filled with tears. Mom, this is beyond anything I imagined. It is perfect for her. I hope she feels that way, I said, suddenly nervous about the reaction of a bride who had never asked for my design. Trust me, Jacob said, hugging me tightly. When Heather sees this gown, everything will change. I wanted to believe him, but as I watched him carry away the product of hundreds of hours of labor and decades of expertise, I felt a knot of anxiety form in my stomach. Would Heather recognize the love and hope stitched into every inch of fabric? Or would this peace offering become another point of contention? The die was cast. The gown was finished. Now we could only wait for the moment of truth. The rehearsal dinner was held at an upscale restaurant downtown with panoramic views of the city skyline. I wore a simple black dress, elegant but deliberately understated. After the dress shopping incident, I had become cautious about my appearance around Heather, a fact that saddened me, but felt necessary for keeping the peace. The evening began pleasantly enough. Heather's parents were charming, particularly her father Greg, who shared my interest in mid-century architecture. We chatted about Frank Lloyd Wright while waiting for the first course, and I found myself relaxing slightly. Perhaps the wedding preparations would proceed smoothly after all. That hope evaporated when Heather arrived 45 minutes late and visibly agitated. She kissed Jacob distractedly and took her seat without apologizing for her tardiness. "The bridal salon is being completely unprofessional," she announced to the table at large. "They claim they cannot find my dress for the final fitting tomorrow. Can you believe it? After what we are paying them." My heart raced. According to the plan, Eloise was supposed to discover a mix-up tomorrow, apologize profusely, and then present Jacob's surprise gift as an alternative. Apparently, Heather had called ahead and thrown a wrench into the timeline. Jacob placed a calming hand on her arm. "I am sure they will sort it out, babe. These things happen." "These things should not happen when someone is spending $12,000, she snapped, then turned to me with a tight smile. "No offense, Catrina, but this is why modern brides use top-tier salons instead of small boutiques. The service quality is supposed to be guaranteed." I took a slow sip of water, choosing my words carefully. Even the best establishments occasionally have miscommunications. I am sure they will resolve it beautifully. "Well, I have put too much planning into this wedding to wear just any dress," Heather continued. "Everything needs to be perfect, especially the photography. The right gown makes all the difference in how the pictures turn out." "Actually," Patricia interjected smoothly, "Catrina would know more about that than most. She has dressed hundreds of brides." Heather's expression shifted to one of mild annoyance. "Mom, we have talked about this. I know Catrina used to design, but wedding fashion has completely transformed since then. What worked in the 80s and 90s would look costumey now." The table fell silent. Thomas reached under the table to squeeze my knee supportively. "I do not think anyone's suggesting you wear something outdated," Greg said clearly, attempting to diffuse tension. "Just that Catrina might have useful perspective on the situation." Heather examined her manicure. "The perspective I need is Eloise's explaining why my dress has apparently vanished 3 days before my wedding." Jacob shot me an apologetic look, then leaned close to Heather's ear, whispering something that made her expression soften slightly. She nodded, and made a visible effort to change the subject, asking her future father-in-law about his recent fishing trip. The rest of dinner progressed with a veneer of pleasantness, masking undercurrents of tension. Conversation remained carefully neutral, centered on wedding logistics and honeymoon plans. When dessert arrived, Heather excused herself to make another call to the bridal salon. "I am so sorry about that," Patricia said quietly once her daughter was out of earshot. "She has always been high-strung, but this wedding has brought out her worst tendencies." "It is a stressful time," I offered diplomatically. "It is more than that," Patricia admitted. "Heather has always felt she has to be exceptional to be valued. Her father and I may have contributed to that pressure without realizing it." I nodded, recognizing something familiar in this description. Had I not felt the same drive to prove myself when starting my career? The difference was that I had channeled that energy into creation rather than criticism. But the underlying insecurity might not be so different. When Heather returned, her face was flushed with anger. "They are still claiming they cannot locate the dress. The manager actually suggested I consider alternatives, as if I could possibly find another gown at this stage." Jacob stood and put his arms around her. "Actually, about that," he began, but Heather pulled away. "Do not tell me to compromise on this, Jacob. Not after everything we have spent on this wedding." "I am not suggesting you compromise," he tried again. "I just think—" "You just think I am overreacting," she cut in, voice rising. "You always take their side." Several other diners turned to look at our table. Jacob's face reddened. "There are no sides here, Heather," he said firmly. "We all want your day to be perfect." "Then, help me fix this," she insisted. "Call Eloise yourself. She will take it more seriously, coming from a man." I watched my son's expression shift from embarrassment to frustration to resignation. He excused himself to make the call, leaving an uncomfortable silence at the table. Heather turned to me suddenly. "You must think I am being ridiculous." The direct address surprised me. Not at all. "Your wedding dress is important." She studied me for a moment, then said, "You probably had some quaint little ceremony with a homemade dress, right? Things were simpler then." Despite her condescending tone, I sensed a genuine curiosity beneath the question. For the first time, I wondered if her dismissive attitude might be a defensive mechanism, a way of preemptively rejecting what she feared would reject her. "Actually, I designed my own gown," I said, It took 6 months and over 400 hours of work. Nothing about it was simple. Something flickered in Heather's expression, perhaps surprise or reassessment. Before she could respond, Jacob returned his face unreadable. "Eloise apologizes for the confusion," he said carefully. "She assures me that everything will be resolved at your appointment tomorrow." Heather seemed about to press for details, but the arrival of Jacob's grandparents created a momentary distraction. By the time everyone was seated again, the conversation had shifted to family anecdotes, with Jacob's grandfather telling stories that had everyone laughing. As the evening wound down, I found myself increasingly anxious about the next day's revelation. What if Heather hated the gown I had created? What if this well-intentioned surprise backfired completely? The thought of my design being rejected not by a client but by my future daughter-in-law filled me with dread. Thomas sensed my unease on the drive home. "You are worrying too much," he said. "The dress is extraordinary, Catrina. It is the finest work you have done in years." "That does not mean Heather will appreciate it," I replied. "You saw how she was tonight. If she is that upset about a dress, she chose herself being temporarily misplaced. Imagine how she will react to being presented with something entirely different." "Jacob knows her better than we do," Thomas reminded me. "He believes this will work." "Jacob is blinded by love and optimism," I countered. "I am starting to think I should call the whole thing off. Tell Eloise to miraculously find the original dress." "It is too late for that," Thomas said gently. "The plan is in motion. And Catrina, regardless of how Heather reacts, you created something beautiful from a place of love and forgiveness. That matters even if she cannot see it yet." I tried to take comfort in his words, but sleep eluded me that night. I kept picturing Heather's face contorted in disappointment or anger when presented with my design. Worse still was the thought of Jacob caught between his fiancé's displeasure and his mother's hurt feelings. By morning I had nearly convinced myself not to attend the wedding at all. I could claim illness, spare everyone the awkwardness of my presence if things went badly. Thomas found me sitting at the kitchen table, still in my robe, staring into a cold cup of coffee. "Talk to me," he said, taking the seat across from me. "I am not sure I can face today," I admitted. "If she rejects the dress, rejects this olive branch." Thomas took my hands in his. "Then we will deal with it together, as we have dealt with everything for the past 40 years. But Catrina, ask yourself this. What would you regret more? Being there to witness possibly uncomfortable moments, or missing your only son's wedding because you were afraid of being hurt?" Put that way, the answer was clear. I squeezed his hands gratefully. "How did you get so wise?" "I married a wise woman," he replied with a smile. "Now get dressed. Whatever happens today, Jacob needs his mother there." As I chose my outfit for the day, I tried to prepare myself for all possible outcomes. If Heather loved the dress, wonderful. If she hated it, I would accept her feelings gracefully and support her finding an alternative even at this late stage. What mattered was not my pride as a designer, but my role as a mother and future mother-in-law. Still, as we drove to the hotel where the bridal party was getting ready, I silently rehearsed words of grace for what might be one of the most uncomfortable moments of my life. The hotel suite was a flurry of activity when I arrived. Bridesmaids in matching robes flitted about, makeup artists arranged their palettes, and Patricia greeted me at the door with a conspiratorial smile and a flute of champagne. "It is here," she whispered, nodding toward a closed bedroom door. "Delivered last night. She has no idea." My hands trembled slightly as I accepted the champagne. "Has she mentioned the missing dress this morning?" "Oh yes," Patricia rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "Several tearful phone calls to the salon already. Eloise is playing her part, perfectly apologetic but insistent that there has been an unexplained delay. She suggested Heather come in to look at alternatives, and we are headed there in about 30 minutes. The timing was precise. Heather would arrive at the salon expecting a crisis, only to be presented with my creation, positioned as a miraculous solution from an anonymous designer who had heard about her plight. "Where is she now?" I asked. "Getting her hair done in the master bathroom. Best to avoid her until she has had more champagne." Patricia winked. "You look lovely, by the way." I had chosen a soft silver dress that complemented the wedding colors without drawing attention. Thank you. I want today to be perfect for them. It will be, Patricia assured me. Once she sees that gown. She trailed off as one of the bridesmaids approached. Mrs. Davis. The hairstylist wants to know if Heather still wants those crystal pins placed on the left side. As Patricia went to consult on this critical decision, I found a quiet corner to observe the preparations. The suite was luxurious with floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the city park where the ceremony would take place later that afternoon. Flowers in cream and blush tones adorned every surface and garment bags containing bridesmaid dresses hung from a portable rack. Two of the bridesmaids conversed in excited whispers near the window, unaware of my presence. "Have you seen it yet?" the taller one asked. "Just a glimpse when they brought it in," replied the other. "It is absolutely breathtaking, nothing like what she described buying." "Thank God. That other dress was so basic. This one looks couture." It must have cost a fortune. Her parents must have pulled some strings. Or Jacob. He comes from money, right? I heard his mom was some big deal back in the day. I suppressed a smile at this assessment and moved away before they noticed me eavesdropping. Their unguarded reaction gave me the first flutter of hope that my design might actually be well received. At precisely 10:30, Patricia marshaled the bridal party for the trip to Eloise's salon. I made an excuse about meeting Thomas for coffee and said I would see them all at the ceremony. In reality, Thomas and I planned to be conveniently near the salon, ready to witness Heather's reaction from a discreet distance. Thomas was waiting in the hotel lobby, handsome in his morning suit. Operation Wedding Gown is proceeding as planned, I informed him as we walked to a cafe across from Eloise's boutique. "I still cannot believe we are engaging in such elaborate subterfuge," he chuckled, "but I have to admit it is rather exciting." From our window table, we could see the bridal party arrive at the salon. Heather entered first, her posture tense even from a distance. The others followed, a procession of pastel robes and expectant faces. "Now we wait," Thomas said, ordering us both coffee. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "The reveal just happened. You might want to come over." The message gave no indication of Heather's reaction. Anxiety knotted my stomach as Thomas and I crossed the street. Had the surprise gone terribly wrong? Was I being summoned for an uncomfortable confrontation? Eloise greeted us at the door, her expression unreadable. "They are in the main salon," she said, leading us toward the back of the boutique. The scene that greeted us was unexpected. Heather stood on the raised platform in the center of the room wearing my creation. The dress fit her perfectly, the architectural lines emphasizing her slender frame, while the delicate beadwork caught the light with every small movement. But it was her face that captured my attention. She was crying, mascara tracking down her cheeks as she stared at her reflection. No one noticed our entrance immediately. Patricia stood nearby, also teary-eyed. The bridesmaids circled the platform, exclaiming over details of the gown. The atmosphere was emotional but impossible to interpret. Were these tears of joy or disappointment? Then Heather turned slightly, and I saw what she was holding, the inner label of the dress which she had discovered bearing my name. Our eyes met across the room, and a dozen emotions flickered across her face in rapid succession. Surprise, confusion, realization, and something else I could not immediately identify. "You," she said, her voice barely audible. "You made this." The room fell silent. Every head turned toward me, then back to Heather, witnessing the tableau of designer and bride, connected by more than just a dress. I stepped forward, uncertain what to say. "Jacob thought you might like something specially made." "But after how I treated you?" Heather's voice broke. "After what I said about your dress." "That does not matter now," I said gently. "It does matter," she insisted. "I was horrible to you, and all this time you were creating this for me." She gestured to the gown, her hands trembling slightly. "This is the most beautiful thing I have ever worn. It is everything I wanted, but could not articulate." Patricia moved to her daughter's side, placing a steadying hand on her arm. "Catrina has spent months on this, sweetheart. Jacob wanted to give you something truly special." "I do not deserve it," Heather whispered, fresh tears spilling. The vulnerability in her voice pierced straight through my lingering hurt. I crossed to the platform and took both her hands in mine. This dress was not made because you deserved it or did not deserve it, I told her. It was made with love for the woman my son loves. For the person who, regardless of our past interactions, will be family after today. Heather's composure crumbled completely. She stepped down from the platform, and to my astonishment, threw her arms around me in a fierce hug. I am so sorry, she sobbed against my shoulder. I have been awful because I was intimidated by you. By your relationship with Jacob, by your accomplishments, by your confidence. I thought you would find me lacking. I held her gently, mindful of the delicate dress. I never found you lacking, Heather. Different from me, yes. But that is not a shortcoming. She pulled back, wiping her eyes and attempting to smile through tears. I just discovered that my wedding dress was designed by Catrina Wilson. Do you know how many brides would kill for that? And I nearly missed appreciating who you are because I was too busy protecting my ego. One of the bridesmaids gasped. Wait, you are the Catrina Wilson, the one who designed for that princess in the 90s. I laughed softly. Duchess, actually. But yes. Oh my God, another bridesmaid exclaimed. My mother still talks about your runway show in Milan. She saved magazine clippings. Heather looked around at her friends, then back to me, a new respect dawning in her eyes. I had no idea. Jacob never said. Jacob wanted you to know me as his mother, not as a designer, I explained, and I preferred it that way too. Eloise, the professional stepped in. We should finish the fitting. There may be small adjustments needed before today. As the focus returned to practical matters, I found a seat beside Thomas, emotionally drained but deeply relieved. He squeezed my hand wordlessly. The next hour passed in a blur of pins and minor adjustments, though the dress required remarkably few alterations. I had gotten the measurements right, and the design elements I had built in for flexibility served their purpose. Throughout the fitting, Heather kept glancing at me with an expression of wonder, as if seeing me for the first time. When we were finally alone in the dressing room, she helping her out of the gown, she said quietly, I do not know how to make this right, how to start over with you. Today is a new beginning in more ways than one, I replied, carefully hanging the dress. Let us just move forward from here. She nodded, then added, Will you help me get ready today? Not just as Jacob's mom, but as the designer. I want to wear this exactly as you envisioned it. The request touched me deeply. I would be honored. Later that afternoon, as Heather prepared to walk down the aisle on her father's arm, I made one final adjustment to her veil. She caught my hand and squeezed it. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. I watched my son's face as he saw his bride for the first time in my creation. The love and pride in his expression was worth every stitch, every hour of work, every moment of doubt. In that perfect moment, as Jacob and Heather joined hands before their assembled loved ones, I realized we had created not just a dress, but a bridge between hearts, between generations. And as I took my place beside Thomas, I felt a quiet certainty that this unexpected journey was just the beginning. The reception sparkled with laughter and champagne golden light from crystal chandeliers, transforming the ballroom into something magical. I watched from our table as Jacob and Heather moved through their first dance, the gossamer train of her gown now removed to reveal the sleeker silhouette beneath. She looked radiant, confident, and completely at ease in the dress that had been made just for her. As the dance concluded, Heather surprised everyone by taking the microphone from the band leader. She glanced in my direction, then addressed the room. Before we continue the celebrations, I want to acknowledge something extraordinary. My wedding gown, which many of you have complimented, was designed and handmade by someone very special. My mother-in-law, Catrina Wilson. A murmur of appreciation rippled through the crowd, particularly from the older guests who recognized my name. What makes this even more meaningful, Heather continued, is that I had no idea she was creating it for me. It was a surprise arranged by my thoughtful husband. She smiled at Jacob. But the true surprise was discovering that the woman I had underestimated, whose expertise I had dismissed, created the most perfect dress I could have imagined. Catrina, would you stand for a moment? Reluctantly, I rose from my seat, unaccustomed to being the center of attention after years behind the scenes. This dress Heather gestured to her gown represents more than beautiful design. It represents forgiveness, understanding, and the beginning of a relationship I nearly sabotaged with my own insecurity. Thank you, Catrina, not just for the dress but for the lesson in grace. The applause that followed was warm and genuine. Thomas squeezed my hand under the table, his eyes shining with pride. As I sat down, guests from nearby tables leaned over to offer congratulations and ask about my design work. For the first time in years, I found myself discussing techniques and inspirations with an interested audience. Later, as dancing filled the floor and Jacob circulated among friends, Heather made her way to our table and took the empty seat beside me. "May I join you for a moment?" she asked, surprisingly tentative. Of course, I smiled. "You should be enjoying your reception, though." "I am," she assured me. "But there is something I need to say while I have the courage." She twisted her new wedding ring nervously before continuing. "My behavior toward you has been inexcusable. The comments about your dress that day at Eloise's, the dismissal of your experience, all of it. I need you to know why, though it is not an excuse." I waited, giving her space to find her words. "I grew up with parents who expected perfection," she began. "My father is a surgeon, my mother ran a successful business. Anything less than excellence was considered failure in our house." "That must have been difficult," I said. She nodded. "When I met Jacob and learned about you, this accomplished designer with this perfect relationship with her son, I panicked. I convinced myself you would find me lacking, that I could never live up to the daughter-in-law you deserved. So I struck first, trying to establish myself as too modern, too sophisticated to be judged by your standards." "Oh, Heather," I said softly. "I never wanted to judge you, I only wanted to know you." "I see that now," she admitted. "But it took this dress, this incredible gift, to make me understand what I was throwing away. The chance to learn from someone like you, to be part of a family where love is not conditional on achievement." The vulnerability in her expression reminded me of Jacob as a child, uncertain and seeking reassurance. I reached over to cover her hand with mine. "We all make mistakes, especially when we are afraid," I told her. "When I was first starting my career, I was so terrified of failure that I alienated several mentors who could have helped me. Pride and fear are a potent combination." "How did you overcome it?" she asked. "Slowly, with many missteps. But eventually I learned that connection is more valuable than protection. Opening yourself to others means risking hurt, but the alternative is isolation." Heather considered this. "I want us to start over. I want to really know you, not the version of you I created in my head." "I would like that very much," I smiled. Our conversation was interrupted by the cake-cutting announcement, but something had shifted between us. A door had opened that could never fully close again. The next 6 months brought gradual but meaningful changes. Heather began calling me weekly at first with careful politeness, then with increasing warmth and genuine interest. She and Jacob came for dinner regularly, and I discovered her quick wit and insight when she wasn't armored in defensiveness. Then came a surprising request. Over Sunday brunch at their new apartment, Heather hesitantly broached a subject. "I have been thinking about my career," she said. "The marketing work is fine, but I have always been drawn to fashion. Not design like you, but the business side of it." I nodded, encouraging her to continue. "There is an opening for a brand strategist at Meridian Fashion Group. It would be a lateral move for me, but in an industry I am passionate about." She took a breath. Would you consider mentoring me? Helping me understand the fashion world from the inside?" The request touched me deeply. "I would be honored, Heather, though the business has changed considerably since my day." "That is exactly why I need your perspective," she insisted. "You understand the foundation, the history that current trends are built on. I can learn the contemporary landscape, but I need your wisdom about what endures." And so began an unexpected collaboration. Twice weekly we met to discuss fashion history, brand building, and the cyclical nature of style. I shared my archives, introduced her to industry contacts who had remained friends, and watched with pride as she secured the position at Meridian. A year after the wedding, Heather approached me with a portfolio. "I have an idea I want to run by you," she said, uncharacteristically nervous. It is about reviving some of your classic designs for a new generation. She opened the folder to reveal a marketing plan for a capsule collection Catrina Wilson legacy that would reintroduce my most innovative work to contemporary brides. The proposal was thoughtful and respectful of my original vision, while acknowledging modern sensibilities. You would have complete creative control, she assured me. I would handle the business and marketing aspects, only if you are interested, of course. The idea of returning to design, even in this limited capacity, sparked something I had thought long dormant. Let me think about it, I said, genuinely intrigued. 2 months later, we launched our first collaborative project, a small collection of 6 wedding gowns based on my most iconic designs updated subtly for today's brides. The response exceeded our expectations with orders from 3 continents and features in major fashion publications. More meaningful than the professional success, however, was the relationship that blossomed through our work together. Heather's marketing brilliance complemented my design experience. Her questions challenged me to articulate principles I had always followed intuitively. My stories gave her insights into an industry she was growing to love. On the anniversary of Jacob and Heather's wedding, we gathered for dinner at their home. As Thomas and Jacob discussed baseball in the living room, Heather and I prepared dessert in the kitchen. I have something to tell you, she said quietly, a smile playing at her lips. We were going to announce it tonight, but I wanted to tell you first. I looked up from the strawberries I was slicing, immediately understanding her expression. You are pregnant. She nodded, eyes bright with happiness. Due in February, you and Thomas are going to be grandparents. I set down my knife and embraced her joy, bubbling up like champagne. Oh, Heather, what wonderful news. There is more, she continued. If it is a girl, we want to name her Catherine after you. Tears sprang to my eyes. I would be honored beyond words. As we rejoined the men with our news and celebrations ensued, I marveled at how completely our relationship had transformed. From antagonism to respect, from wariness to love, the journey had been neither simple nor painless. Yet the result was a connection far richer than the polite cordiality I had initially hoped for. Looking around at my growing family, I realized that the most beautiful things I had ever created were not made of fabric and thread, but of forgiveness and second chances. Relationships like the finest couture require patience, vision, and meticulous attention to detail. They demand our best efforts and most generous hearts. Sometimes the people who challenge us most become our greatest teachers. Heather had forced me to examine my own insecurities about aging and relevance. She had pushed me out of comfortable semi-retirement and back into creative engagement with my life's work. In trying to build a bridge to her, I had rediscovered parts of myself I had too readily set aside. As the evening drew to a close, Heather pulled me aside one last time. I keep thinking about that day at Eloise's, when I said such cruel things about your dress, she said. Do you know what amazes me most? You could have responded with equal meanness. You could have refused to design my gown when Jacob asked. You could have revealed your accomplishments to put me in my place. What would that have accomplished? I asked gently. Exactly, she nodded. You chose creation over destruction, connection over division. That choice changed everything. It changed me. Her words stayed with me long after we had returned home that night. In my studio, surrounded by sketches for our next collection, I reflected on how often in life our most painful moments can become doorways to unexpected joy if we are brave enough to keep our hearts open. Have you ever experienced a relationship that began with misunderstanding but grew into something meaningful? Share your story in the comments below. The journey from conflict to connection is one we all navigate at some point, and your experiences might help someone else find their way forward. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more reflections on family forgiveness and finding beauty in unexpected places. And remember, sometimes the most exquisite creations, whether gowns or relationships, begin with a single thread of kindness, extended even when it seems undeserved. Thank you for listening to my story today.